And we are back on the Moneyline Monaco podcast. Alex Monaco joining you live on TikTok at Moneyline Monaco. Insta, same handle, 2 underscores unheard of in the world of Twitter, Alex Monaco. And we are dancing. NFL Week 8, almost intermish, not quite in a 17 work week now for these NFL boys, goes all the way to week 18. So week 8 used to mean middle of the road. Now we got one more week. You don't really have a happy medium for the middle of the season with an odd list of games, but we have an interesting slate here. We are fresh off of ending our 3-game winning streak on Thursday night. I am, and I'm sure if you're watching, sleeping off an L. And I talked it out, Vikings Rams. I was so upset because I saw the splits, and then you get closer to game time and the pick's already out. I mean, that game in the first half, I think there were 2 third downs that would have had Rams possessions and the drives and a little laundry on the field. And we obviously end with the face mask, the most obvious rip of the helmet we've seen all year, no call, yada, yada, yada. The point of this story, the moral of it, is to sit back and say, all right, it's 90% of the public on the Vikings, 10% on the other side, man versus machine, towers versus person, which has lasted longer, and without even saying any more. You know where I'm going with it. Often, I will go with my gambling gut above all, despite where the tickets are, despite what the number is. And we still typically end the seasons above sea level, but this is one of those games that really haunts me. I'm off 2 really disgusting L's, Chargers over Cardinals, Rams beating the Vikings, getting 2.5. And it's really a bummer because if that closed at +3, probably would have gave you Rams +3. I really thought I was going to land on 3. And we have a double-digit Rams win. And it's just one of those games, week to week, pendulum swinging. Didn't quite think Puka was going to come back and be a factor. I mean, you want to talk about really where the value was in that game to put a button on it. It was on the prop market. I mean, Puka Nacua was sitting there at 29.5 receiving yards. He got it on the first drive. All right. I threw out a prop 7-1 for Puka to get 6 catches. It was the only conceivable win I had in the entire evening. But we move forward. Just a little lesson. If you see me take a side, you then do your research and you see Vegas is on the other side, don't back me. Just take Vegas. Sometimes it works out in the public's favor. Often it doesn't. 90-10, side with the 10. All right, we get into week 8. 5 games I got. A couple of marquee matchups. Some numbers I love. I think this is a 4-1 episode, if I don't say so myself. And, 3-2 in the last 5 weekends against the spread. That's 3 wins, 2 losses of 5 picks a weekend. So we're due here off a 2-3 week where we got burned in a couple of ways. A hook cost us a winning week, but it doesn't matter. This is about locking in wins and getting on the board. Let's start out with the Philadelphia Eagles dancing against the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincy. And I'll give you where the splits are. Of course, on a Friday, Feel Good Friday, New York City. Got to shout out the boys, Bart and Hahn. Just got off a live ESPN New York hit at Stout on 33rd Street. Great spot if you want to catch Rangers games, Knicks games, right next to the Garden. So coming off of that, a little warmed up, taking these picks on a live radio hit on ESPN New York. So let's dive in here. Bengals -2.5. Sharp side, correct side. Punch it in, baby. We are selling high off an Eagles team who have won 2 straight weeks on a really lackluster effort against a Browns team that was spiraling, finally rekindling their scenario over there in Cleveland with Deshaun gone. I believe Jameis is getting the start out of the bullpen. But you look at obviously an emotional win this Philly team had, just decimated the New York Football Giants. It was all about Saquon. It was all about establishing the run. And that was one of those games where really it was kind of over by intermission. And if you look at a lot of Phillies games this season, you sort of get a little bit of a feel as to, is this team going to be kind of coasting and the game plan's working, the Kellen Moore offense flowing? Or is this one of these games, and you've seen them in a couple of them, a 15-12 game against a Saints team? I'm going to call that 20-16 win but no cover, sort of similar theme-wise a couple of weeks ago against the Browns. Or you're kind of ending up in one of these spots where, all right, this is not going Philly's way. You can tell early, Tampa Bay. You can tell in a couple of these games against Green Bay and Brazil, seems like a lifetime ago. And the other dance, I'm slipping on the game, but it was an interesting kind of season for Philly here where, all right, you're giving up defensively with Fangio's D a ton of yards and not really with banged up pieces on offense, fully getting kind of your hypothesis. You know, A.J. Brown missed a couple games. Devontae Smith, he had to dance Jalen Hurts with no starting two receivers in a couple of those. So you didn't really fully get fact gather and give yourself a conclusion of Philly. And here they are getting 2.5 off of 2 straight wins. And let's talk Bengals here. Now, Bengals, they're a 3-4 team fighting for their life. They're also off a 2-game win streak. Now, this is a team that arguably would be hitting a little bit of a stride if Burrow didn't throw a slant interception against the Baltimore Ravens and sorely cost them a huge win. Otherwise, we're talking about a Bengals team that lost by 1 point and a ridiculous flag against the Chiefs and one really bad showing against the Commanders. Other than that, they've been in every game. Now, positive Bengals last 2 weeks, quarterbacks have outrun running backs. Daniel Jones had more than Tracy running for the Giants when the Bengals won that game and covered Sunday night, in MetLife. And DTR subbing out of nowhere had more yards than Chubb. So if there is a bright spot, Bengals aren't stopping the run per se, still getting around, over 130-ish, but they're getting better. And, a Bengals D with not a lot of bright spots, giving up 21 points total in the last 8 quarters with 6 sacks in those last 2 games. That's positive. Now, obviously, you've seen an uptick in this Bengals D with Hendrickson. And you're talking about Jordan Mailata, key offensive lineman for the Eagles, not playing in this one. This was the rugby dude who converted to an offensive lineman, and he's been sensational. He's not in this. You got to remind yourself, Hendrickson and Hubbard can get to the quarterback on a non-traditional starting line like we have in this one. And then you go X's and O's and you remind yourself that Philly is a bottom 3 turnover team. They're -6. And despite all things, the Bengals are +2 in the turnover category. Only 2 Joey Burrow interceptions. So to wrap it in a bow, you say, all right, 3 straight games with no Hurts turnovers. That's likely not going to happen in this one. I like an interception prop. I like a turnover. And I do like an Eagles team who's got the least amount of takeaways in the league with just 2 interceptions to kind of run up against a club that if it's a shootout, I lean Bengals. And if it's a 2017 game, I lean Bengals. They're going to have a clean side of their street to win this game. And I don't see it. I like the Bengals less than a field goal at home with the public leaning Philly +2.5. Give me the who day at home, Cincy -2.5. All right, marquee matchup. Go a little faster here. That was a little bit of a ramble. Cowboys +4.5 at the moment. I'll lock it in at +4 if you want to take it. Sunday night primetime at Levi's Stadium with no Debo, with no Ayuk out for the year, and still no McCaffrey. And just to give you the statistics of what Brock Purdy in his humble young career has been with those 3 assets gone, we're talking about 50% of his entire offensive production gone. 50% of Brock Purdy's work is done to Ayuk, Debo, and McCaffrey. and they ain't there. You got to remind yourself what you saw with this Niners team last week. You saw him throwing two guys like Ronnie Bell, Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing. Now, let's say Kittle eats. He gets 90 yards. He gets his 6 catches. He even gets in the end zone. Are we sitting here off a Cowboys team that the last time you saw him put up 9 and give up over 40 with 2 weeks to prep off a bye, not kind of licking their chops here? Now, a couple of things remain evident. If Dak turns this ball over like he's done all season, and this Cowboys team has done all season, they too like Philly, and the negative on turnover differentials, -6, we're in hot water here. But if the Cowboys come in buttoned up, 2 of their games, they won 2015, 2017. That's Cowboys football this year. If they're going to win, I don't think this is a Cowboys team that if they get in shootouts, they're in a good spot. They got to play this game humble. Now, a couple of trends here to think about. Mike McCarthy, 3-1 covering off of buys with the Cowboys. Mike McCarthy, 12-5 to his name off of buys. Extra rest for Dak as well bodes well. Now, Niners favor in every game, just 2-2 at home this year. All that domination at home last year, out the window. Also, road teams covered in 8 of the last Cowboys 9 games. They're in this spot getting a 4 or 4.5 number. But you have to say out loud, Cowboys going against a Niners team, not a top 10 rushing D, not a top 10 passing D as far as yards given up, and not a top 10 overall D as far as points per game against. Now, they can get to the quarterback top 10, but this is still a Cowboys offense that, yes, 4 interceptions last couple games, 6 sacks last couple games. Got to correct that. Are they going to even try to establish a run? I'm not quite sure, but this game's just as much about what Dak's going to do turnover-wise or not as what Purdy's going to do with a less than healthy offensive staff. I mean, this is a defense that's been otherwise banged up. Now, Micah Parsons questionable, likely trending to go. But they're also getting a cornerback Bland back. You remember him picking balls off a little bit last year. Kendricks, linebacker, dancing. We obviously have Parsons likely in, and Jordan Phillips, another pass rusher in the mix. So you start to kind of work backwards. All right, Niners do have the Cowboys number. That's point blank, period. But 3 top assets gone for San Fran. Jordan Mason hasn't run for over 90 yards in almost a month of football. And a healthier, rested Cowboys team off an embarrassing boat race L. All of that adds up from a football psychology standpoint to want to back a Cowboys team with the number. Do they go into San Fran on primetime, win this game? I'm not saying they do. I'm saying, can they keep it close and cover? The answer is swipe right. Yes. Give me the Cowboys plus 4.5 or plus 4. I like this number to kind of close by Sunday night at 3.5. I think this look ahead line at 5.5 trending down is starting to get a little sharper square where, again, the public would sit here and go, easy decision. Niners at home. Not so fast, Jatski. Give me the Dallas Cowboys. Disgusting purchase, but a purchase we had to do. All right, let's get chalky. Let's get gross. Let's take a New York Jets team -7, a Cardinal sin in the betting world. You take a divisional road favorite -7, forget about winning long term. But this is a spot where momentum is building towards a Jets all-out burial dub, and it has to come right now. And we're talking about a Patriots team that went to London town and came back and has to remind themselves they've won 1 football game at home in the last 2 years. They're 1-10 at Gillette. Dish me some shaving cream. 1-10 at Gillette in the last 2 seasons. All right? They've lost 7 in a row at home. They lost 24-3 to this team, in which the Jets had touchdowns in the first 3 quarters. It's the best complete game that I saw in person at MetLife the Jets have played all season. You got to think about Rodgers against this scheme. Couple weeks back, 77% completion percentage, no interceptions, 281 yards. You could make a case with 2 tutties. That was his best offensive game. And he was surgical. He was putting the ball where he wanted. This was pre-motion being an issue. This was their second game, actually, after a win against the Titans. It's been a long time. They're off an array of L's. Pick an L, any L. An international one to Van Finkel, Ginkle, Einhorn. How about that pick six that they haven't gotten over? How about not even scoring a basket in the second half against the Steelers? That was a first half that looked promising in Pittsburgh, and then they just gave up. And then we just lost at sea. Devontae Adams has lost 2 times to the Pittsburgh Steelers in 6 sleeps. Rough go for 1-7. But if we're just talking about the actual what we saw a couple weeks ago versus what we have now situation, look, we have a top 2 pass D in the New York Jets. If they do anything well on defense, it's stop the pass. Not many teams pass on this team. You got to sit here and go, they should have beat the Broncos. They should have stole that game against the Vikings after a terrible start, almost got back. All right, and they're off a really bad second half in a go to the bullpen, Russell Wilson, no tape on him in Pittsburgh type game. Do we give him a break? I don't know that we give him a break. I've been very positive about the Jets, very high on the Jets and losing a lot of money on the Jets. Now I'm sitting here going, all right, -7 versus a Patriots team that hasn't covered in their last 6 games. Did they look good in the first half against the Jags? They did. They had a little bit of pep in their step. Drake May had a couple of easy reads. He delivered, and then they just got boat raced. Desperate team, big number, but an Aaron Rodgers complete gut check moment. Now, I'm just letting you know we are not absolutely on a sharp side here, unlike the previous 2 games where public seems to be leaning Niners. Public seems to be leaning Eagles. Can't sit here and say that. And this one, try to give you a little insight as to if I'm on a sharp side or a public side. Definitely not on a sharp side here. Jets -7, never a sharp bet. Ever. The team hasn't won in 3 weeks. They're laying 7. You say that out loud. You say, no way. We've also seen road favorites last 2 weeks be a theme. Let's hope that continues. Fingers crossed, Aaron Rodgers' 40-year-old frame comes to show up and show out. Let's talk Buffalo Bills crossing the country to the PNW, baby. And they're laying 3 and another side where the public seems like the Seattle Seahawks can cover this number at home. DK Metcalf ain't playing. A lot of pressure. This becomes a much different offense with 2 sort of more slot route running separation contingent receivers in Jackson Smith and the Jigba, and of course, Tyler Lockett. Seattle wins a game in Atlanta, not an easy place to play at all. But let me tell you that they were outgained in yards. They were outgained in first downs, but they won 3 turnovers over on an Atlanta Falcons team that included a fumble return for a touchdown. And you're going to win that game 8 out of 10. You win a turnover battle by +3 and you take care of the football. Again, I can shout you these numbers, yardage, downs. They figure out a way to outgain them. Well, now you're going against a juggernaut. And they may have not any star names on receivers for the first 5-6 weeks of the season. Well, now they got Amari. And now they got Cooper scoring. And now they got Keon Coleman opening up last week against the Titans 4 for 125. Now, that may be no small feat. You know who gives up the least amount of yards in the NFL? The Tennessee Titans. Believe it or not, go look it up. The least amount of yards gained, the Buffalo Bills scored against this team at will in the second half. They were down again. It's the second time the Bills have been at home, Cardinals now, and this last week against Tennessee, where you're getting them in a pickup. And the next thing you know, you look up and the spread's double digit. So we have a top 10 defense giving up 19.7. We have the number 1 turnover differential team +12 in this game on our side, Buffalo. We have a new revitalized offense with a real piece, a real one. We have a Bills team that's won 7 of their last 8 against the NFC, and we have a Seahawks team failing to cover the spread in 4 of their last 5 at home. We got to remember, before the Falcons win, they lost to Detroit, the Giants, and the Niners. And they didn't just lose these games. I mean, 42 to the Lions, 29 to the Giants, 36 to the Niners. I mean, this is ridiculous as far as numbers. You just aren't particularly used to seeing, at least in a Mike McDonald defense. So a Buffalo team that, again, can put it on you and pour it on you. Relatively well balanced. James Cook runs a football. And now we're talking about a number one receiver gone for Seattle, while a number one receivers gained for Buffalo. And if you want to know where the money is and the tickets, the public is leaning Seattle and the Sharps are leaning Bills -3. Now, if it's -3.5, we don't want to touch it because now you're asking Buffalo to win by 4. They win by 3. We push, plug our schnoz, move on. I like Buffalo in a game that, to me, comes down to defense. I think this is a Seattle team that will move the ball without question. They often do. I don't know that they punch it in. They lose a real red zone piece. This Buffalo D was very banged up the last few weeks. They have gotten healthier. And Josh Allen, until he goes back to his 18 career high last year interception ways, is starting to show me he can dance a little. So I'm going to take a Buffalo team that hopefully just takes care of an inferior opponent in a number that I think is achievable to cover in a game where we have a better D, a better quarterback, a better coach team, and a small number. Tough place to play, not as of late. And we wrap with a dog and a gross game. And if it goes to 9.5, I suppose I'll still co-sign, but nab it at 10 on a Friday. On a Friday when everyone's talking about the World Series. The Las Vegas Raiders are going to host the Patrick Mahomes Kansas City Chiefs in Vegas. And we're getting 10. It's going to sound a little contradictory here because I just told you to lay 7 with the Jets on the road. But this Raiders team covers, baby. Just cover, baby. Antonio Pierce. I mean, Minshew comes out of the bullpen. He throws there's a pick 6 that ensues. There's 3 interceptions that ensue. And he still finds a way to kick a meaningless, not so meaningless, shout out Al Michaels field goal to some to cover a 20-15 number for Vegas backers. And this is what Pierce does, baby. Let's not forget, Pierce won this game on Christmas Day, gut check game, became the Grinch in Kansas City at Arrowhead. They won a game outright 20-14 last year. O'Connell threw for 62 yards. They won the game. I'm not telling you they're winning the game. They're covering the game. All right? The unders hit in 4 straight Chiefs games. If you know in betting that unders, teams are more under hits than overs, and they're going against a club that's getting a big betting number, you know this in betting. You back the number because you believe the game's going to go under. That's what I believe we have here. Now, not a lot of bright spots for Vegas, but they're the 8th best passing defense. They give up 180 a pop. That's a real passing defense. Now, obviously, Mahomes 10-2 in his career against this Raiders team. But we also know that when he's laying more than 3.5, he's a 46% cover. He's 38-44-2 against the spread when he's laying more than a field goal and a half, 3.5. Now, 12 straight wins for the Chiefs. They've only beat one team by more than 10, the Saints, on Monday night. 12-game win streak back to last year, one game by more than this number. I know it's Minshew. I know it's the Raiders. I'm telling you, no one's going to back this Raiders number. No one's going to want to touch him. The game plays to the under. The Raiders cover this number. I just see it, and I know it. And this isn't 10 at Arrowhead, where they won on Christmas. This is 10 at home. I think you got to do it, folks. So, we wrap with the Raiders plus 10, dancing against a quarterback that has more interceptions than touchdowns to his name. Patty Mahomes, 8 picks, 6 tugs. We are backing the Jets -7. What? We are backing the Bills -3. We got 2 dogs in the mix. Raiders, of course, being one of them, and the other being the Cowboys +4.5. I co-signed it +4, but it's 4.5 on the FanDuel Sportsbook on Friday afternoon. Lock it in. And the Bengals -2.5. And to just put a button on it, Bengals, not the public side. Bills, not the public side. Raiders, not the public side. Jets, and blanking here. Jets, completely blanking. And our last pick, which is a not great spot, but we got to do it. And Jets -3. Bills -3 is what we got to do. So Raiders +10, Bills -3, Bengals -2.5 is where we're at. Cowboys +4. We go 3-2, 4-1. I'll be a happy man. So again, to wrap it up, we got the Raiders to cover. We got the Bengals to cover. We got the Cowboys to cover. We got the Jets to cover. And we got the Bills to cover. All right. Appreciate you watching. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review. Goes a long way. Moneyline Monaco. Don't forget to hug your mothers. Ta-ta, real spin.